My name is Jolene Cooper. I am the Chief Barker and owner of Big Sky Barkery, and this is Clay Cooper, my husband and assistant barkery baker. And today we are at the Missoula Public Library demo kitchen to show you how to make some fun, delicious treats for your favorite furry friend at home. We're going to start out making some pup cakes for your favorite pooch to enjoy, so that hopefully they'll have time to cool as we're making the next batch of things so we can decorate these. We're going to start with our wet ingredients. We want to mix those in first, and then we'll add in some dry ingredients to get everything to come together. So in my bowl here I have some pumpkin, canned pumpkin, and you want the straight pumpkin. You don't want any of the seasonings added to it that you would use for pumpkin pie. And then just some unsweetened applesauce. It's very important to check your ingredients. You don't want anything added like xylitol, which can be toxic to dogs. So that's not, the kind of treat you want to give your friend. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this applesauce and pumpkin to my bowl. I do like to weigh out my ingredients, which I've done beforehand. I find it's more accurate that way, and you get a more consistent result when baking. But if you don't have a scale at home, you can also just use measuring cups. And so in there I have 12.1 ounces of applesauce and 9.5 ounces of pumpkin. I'm going to add 2 eggs, and we do try and use, specifically for the barkery, local eggs and local ingredients whenever possible. So these are some delicious eggs from Spencer's Valley View Farm. The applesauce is also just applesauce that you would buy at the grocery store for yourself, or that you would potentially just have at home. I would just stress that it should be unsweetened and no seasonings added to it like cinnamon or nutmeg. They don't need anything like that, and sometimes in high amounts those doses or those herbs and spices can make animals sick. So if you keep it really simple, then your pet's going to have a really positive experience, as will you. So we're just going to crack our eggs right in there. And if you're worried about shells getting in, like, your dog won't mind. I am not a fan of it, but if you do get shell in there, an easy trick, if you haven't heard it, is to use the eggshell to scoop that shell out. It's attracted to itself, and so it scoops out super easy, even if it's just like little pieces of egg. So we're going to put those aside, and I am going to rinse my hand of egg. Don't want to make anything else eggy while we're doing this. It sounds like the oven is warmed up. We do have the oven preheated to 345 degrees on the convection setting, or on this oven it's called Aero Bake or True Aero. We use a convection oven at home as well for the barkery because it's like consistent even heating and it tends to go a little bit faster. Thank you. And so I'm just going to real quick whisk together my pumpkin, my unsweetened applesauce, and my 2 eggs until they're combined. And then to that mixture, I'm going to add my dry ingredients, which I've pre-measured at home. And so in here I have 4.8 ounces of Wheat Montana Bronze Chief wheat flour, and then 3.1 ounces of, again, Wheat Montana rolled oats, and then 1.5 ounces of the golden flaxseed. And the oatmeal and flaxseed I grind down into a powder to make the nutrients more viable to the pet as they eat them. Otherwise, if you leave those things whole, they'll primarily go through undigested, and they won't get the nutritional benefits of both those things. The flax also adds like a nice kind of like sweet, nutty flavor to the treats, and we don't add any sugar to them, so it does add a little bit of sweetness if that's something your dog might like, but usually just the pumpkin part is going to be enough to really attract them. So we're going to put most of the flour mixture in here, and we're going to reserve a little bit. Brought some fresh blueberries that I've already rinsed at home as well. And we're going to put some of these in this jar here to coat them in a little bit of the flour, and hopefully that'll prevent them from sinking to the bottom of the mixture. It started out as 6 ounces of blueberries, and I'm shooting for about 4 ounces in the actual cupcake mix, and then the rest we'll use to decorate the cupcakes. Give these guys a little swirl-a-do in here. Swirl-a-doo is my new word of the day. Don't think I've ever said that before, but it's fun. It sounds like the other oven is now ready.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and whisk this flour in here. And this is kind of a wetter batter. This isn't the usual cupcake recipe I make for market. This is more of a cake recipe. It also has baking soda in it, which I don't think I stated when I was adding the dry ingredients, but it does help it rise and become a little more cake-like than the cupcakes, which is a little more fun for decorating and stuff like that. So that's why I chose that recipe. So all that stuff is incorporated, and now we'll throw in our blueberries that have been floured. Give those a fold in here. You can also use frozen blueberries. You don't need to thaw them or anything. Just measure out the 4 ounces, or that's roughly half a cup of blueberries. I would still coat them in flour if you think about it, just because it does keep them from sinking to the bottom a little bit. You can also microwave them to thaw them out and then puree them and add them to your batter. It makes for a kind of a pretty blue cupcake. And then it's fully incorporated and you don't have to worry about little bits of blueberry all over your house, because that's a thing that can sometimes happen. So now we're going to go ahead and grab our pans for baking. I brought a mini muffin pan and then also a square baking dish. Both of these are pretty easy to use. You just want to spray them pretty well with Pam or some kind of cooking spray, making sure, of course, that that's going to be something safe for dogs. But most things that you would find for people are going to be okay. So the Pam, coconut oil, both of those would be fine. Okay. You just want to make sure that it's nice and coated, otherwise the cupcakes will stick and they're not fun to get out. Clay's going to go ahead and spray the small glass one for us. You can decorate either way, and sometimes it's fun to make a square cake, or you can cut it out so it looks like a bone shape and decorate that. The cupcakes are fun because you can make individual cakes for your pet, or you can put them together as like a pull-apart cupcake and like decorate it as one entity, and then you know, pull them apart for your pets to enjoy, or if you're having a pup party. So we're going to do a little bit of both here. It's pretty easy. You just use a scoop. If you don't have a scoop at home, you just want to make sure that all of them are roughly the same amount going in so that they all cook at the same pace. And I want to make both little cupcakes and the cake, so I'm going to go every other to start, and then use the rest of the batter for the cake. Realizing this isn't a really great view. There we go. And these are really like a nice healthy treat. They're, again, they don't taste bad. They're just not overly sweet. If I were to make something like this for people, I would definitely add sugar to it, or you know, some kind of sweet frosting to make it more appealing. But I definitely have known children that have liked both these treats and then the other hard treats we're going to be making today, because they're not sweet. I'm just going to pass that off to you. Clay will be taking care of all of my dirty dishes today, as per our normal agreement. He's a great dishwasher. Can't stress that enough.
I do the cleaning.
Pretty wonderful agreement. And we'll just pour this guy in here. I do like to get every last bit out. Just doing a little tappity tap on the table there, get the air bubbles out so we have nice pretty little cupcakes, or pup cakes as I should call them, always. And I'll just smooth this guy out a little bit. And I did say most baking sprays would be okay to use for dogs, but I would hesitate in using like an avocado oil spray. I feel like avocado is one of those things that can be hit or miss in animals. It can be toxic to some, so I would just stick with something like a Pam or coconut oil. So there's that. And I heard both ovens go off here, so we're just going to go ahead and pop these guys in. We're going to keep an eye on them though. This isn't my normal oven at home, so all ovens are a little bit different. So everything I'm saying is like a starting guide, but definitely keep an eye on your items. You don't want to like walk away or lose track. And then we'll set a timer for, we're going to start with 15 minutes and we'll check them at that point to see where they're at and go from there, which will give us plenty of time to get some other treats made. This next round is our limited ingredient treats. Again, something that you should be able to make at home with ingredients that you may already have on hand. And again, something that's pretty healthy for your dogs to enjoy as well. So in these limited ingredient treats, it literally is just flour, peanut butter, pumpkin, and then water or apple juice. If you're concerned your dog has a lot of food allergies and you don't want to add the apple juice, you can use water instead. The apple juice is nice though because it adds some sweetness. It is unsweetened apple juice, but apples are sweet. The peanut butter, we like to use the Adams Natural Crunchy, again checking for ingredients like xylitol, which can be toxic. Also, dogs don't need the extra sugar. People don't either, but we like it. I like my dogs to eat healthy when I'm treating them, so they still love the way it tastes, but they don't miss the sugar, and I feel better about them eating it. So for this recipe, it doesn't really matter, like everything just kind of gets put in the bowl together. So that's 9 ounces of flour, 9 ounces of peanut butter, 9 ounces of pumpkin. The one thing about the Adams Natural Crunchy Peanut Butter, it definitely does need some significant stirring before you measure it. Thank you. And again, I weighed all these guys out, but you can also use just measuring cups if that's what you have at home. Zoom tight. Try and get all of the delicious peanut butter out of here. We have a lab at home that is more than happy to lick any spoons that he's given with leftover ingredients. So that's always an option as an extra treat too, but I don't know. Then our little Chihuahua, like the straight peanut butter is too much for him. It seems to upset his stomach. So, you know your pet's best. Again, we're using straight pumpkin with no added seasonings to it, just canned pumpkin pack. And then as far as the liquid added to this to make it into a rollable dough, it kind of depends. Like a lot of things can affect how dough is rolled out, including temperature and humidity outside. So the recipe starts with half a cup of apple juice or water, but it may require more or less than that depending on your environment and how your dough is working. So I'm just going to measure out half a cup to start. And this is unsweetened apple juice. And we do also have like our cookie cutters ready. If you don't have cookie cutters, you can use just a glass turned over to cut out circles. If you have a pasta roller, you can just literally cut out squares. The aesthetics of it are more for us than the pets. Like our dogs are happy with bones or squares or crumbs they find on the floor after we've had a baking day. I do like to mix these ingredients together a little bit before I add the wet ingredients. And we do pretty exclusively use wheat Montana ingredients for the flour, the rolled oats, and then the golden flaxseed. And so you can already see the dough starting to come together a little bit. I'm not entirely sure this is going to use a whole half cup of apple juice, but we'll see how it goes. Sometimes also, if your ingredients are really cold, it'll make the dough harder to work. So if you microwave for just a few seconds or have your stuff at room temperature before you mix it together, that might be a little bit easier. I don't think that this is going to require all of the apple juice that we have for it.
And can they use regular flax too, or do they have to use the golden flax?
Oh, nope, there's also just, I believe, like a black flax seed available that you can use. We actually, I think, even special order the golden flax, but we do use a rather large amount of it. So there's that. You can also substitute if you think that your pet has a grain allergy. Instead of using wheat flour for this recipe, you can also use rice flour. That does sometimes make for a more difficult to work dough. And I maybe should have stopped adding some apple juice before I did, because this is a pretty wet dough, but we're still going to make it work.
If they make it too wet, how can they recover that?
They can recover that really easy if they have extra flour, which would have been a really great idea to bring with me, but I didn't. So but wait, there's more. Oh, that definitely will totally fix it. Like, problem solved. Perfect. Thank you. Great work. Sometimes it's good. Like, this surface looks really nice, but you might have to flour your work surface at home, especially if you have made this mistake and your dough is a little too wet. So we're just gonna go with it though. This might end up having to bake a little bit longer too, because it's a little bit wetter. For the dry treats, you typically do want them to be pretty well baked. That makes them pretty shelf stable too, because there's no moisture in there to go bad. Yep, we're going to go ahead and roll these out using a rolling pin. I like to use one that has a guard on it so that everything's the same consistency and thickness, because it'll bake more evenly that way. If you don't have a rolling pin with guards at home, you know, you just kind of look at your dough and see if it looks even. I mean, if not, your pet is not going to really worry that, you know, one of the cookies is bigger than the other one. They're just going to enjoy the extra treat. So.
And currently this is the 6 millimeter for thickness.
And this is one of those, I like to challenge myself sometimes, so this is what's happening now. This is going to be a challenge, but it's going to be a fun one. Just going to roll this out. We're going to have to be kind of careful because, again, did not bring extra flour, slacker. Let's see if I can get this up. Okay, okay. And the nice thing is, though, that I do at least have tools here that can help me pry the dough off the counter if need be. Oh. There's at least one challenge in the kitchen and you're doing something wrong. Or wait, maybe that's not the way it's supposed to go. That's just me. This recipe doesn't make a huge amount of treats. You can increase it or decrease it if you want to, if you only want to make a few treats. The fun thing about these two is it's another thing you can use to decorate your pup cakes later, because you'll have little bones. And then I brought mustaches as well. This is technically not even a cookie cutter. It's one of those things you're supposed to use like on sandwich bread for kids or whatnot, so they have little sandwiches on their bread or toast. But it makes for a real fun dog treat too, because then you can hold it in front of your dog and give them a mustache and say things like, "I mustache if you like this treat." You do want to keep in mind though that with any dough you make, even if you use the right amount of flour, the more intricate the cookie cutter, the more difficult it is to get the dough out. So sticking with something simple like a mustache shape or a bone shape can be easier in the long run. We had some really adorable moose cookie cutters for a while, and the problem with them was the legs and the antlers were almost impossible to get out without breaking. So that was a short-lived experiment.
That and the narrower ones, when baking, it was the consistency of baking. The legs and antlers finished before the rest of the body did.
Right. You have like a partially cooked moose. It's no good for anyone. This dough is really easy to cut through, so not a lot of pressure needs to go down to cut these out. Usually Clay follows behind and picks treats up for me, but definitely don't want to put him through this today because somebody forgot to bring extra flour. No, that would definitely be me. But even with that, these are actually turning out really well, so. And I believe I mentioned with alternate flours, you might find that you need to use less fluids to get them to the point of being able to work them. I have also found with alternate flours that those tend to go bad faster. You have to really make sure that they're cooked very thoroughly or baked very thoroughly, because otherwise they seem to retain moisture, and then they mold, which is no fun. Definitely don't give your dogs moldy treats. They may want them, it may seem like a good idea, but it can definitely still make them sick. There are also a lot of resources online if you have questions about ingredients to use for your dog, or if something is potentially toxic or not good for them. We're going to discard that one. I don't like the way it turned out. Websites you can go to double check and make sure that you're not using anything that could be bad. You definitely want to avoid grapes or raisins of any kind. They cause a toxicity in dogs. They still don't 100% understand why that is or what the toxic amount is for different dogs. Some dogs seem able to eat grapes just fine with no problem, and then literally other dogs will eat one grape and will die. So it's very important to make sure you're not doing anything like that. Berries like blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, those are safe.
Huckleberries.
Huckleberries are great. The only problem with huckleberries is maybe don't take your dog huckleberry picking, because they'll figure out pretty quickly where those delicious berries come from. And then you'll find that you're not only, potentially trying to get berries before someone else, another person gets them, but your dog is then trying to eat them. We no longer take our dogs huckleberry picking with us because they're huckleberry pigs and they try and eat our berries or slobber all over them. However, we do use huckleberries in our pup cakes sometimes, so that's a fun treat for them. Also something you can use to decorate pup cakes or throw into the pup cake batter.
Do you have to use a cookie cutter, or could you make it like a cookie?
Oh, you could, like a drop cookie?
Well, like flattened out, like.
Oh yeah, you could definitely just, probably not that one. But, if you don't have a cookie cutter at home, even something like, ooh, yeah, there we go. Just use the lid. You can make a round cookie, or if you had a glass jar or cup, you could just use that to use circles. Or again, if you even just had a knife or a pasta cutter, you could just roll this out and then cut it into squares or diamonds or, any shape you really wanted. Just try and shoot for like something that's roughly the same size, again, so it cooks more evenly. Otherwise, you're having to, kind of more monitor what's in the oven and then start having to take stuff out piecemeal, which makes everything take a little bit longer and probably isn't super efficient. When I start getting near the end, oftentimes for the barkery, when we've made the amount of treats we need to make or want to make, after that everything becomes samples and we just cut them out with a pasta roller. I'm gonna make a few more mustaches though. And usually when you're making like rollout cookies for people, you don't usually want to roll out the dough too many times because it makes for a tough cookie. But fortunately, our furry friends don't really seem to mind a cookie that's got a little bit of extra chew, if it even does. So you can use all of your cookie dough. You don't have to discard any of it. If you find that you've made a dough that's too dry and it's starting to flake or peel apart as you're getting down near to the end, you can certainly add a little more of your fluid to it, apple juice or water, to just rehydrate the dough a little bit and then continue working it from there. And then these guys, I think I'm just going to cut into samples or squares. Or if you're doing this knowing that you're going to be decorating a cupcake and have something else in mind, you can certainly cut out whatever shape you wanted for that cupcake. I even have like letter alphabet cookie cutters at home, so if I wanted to spell out a happy bark day to some dog, you could do that. Just cutting the samples though, I like to do that directly on the parchment so I don't have to worry about picking up tiny little pieces of treat. I'll just cut these guys into some squares. Oh, those look delicious, but definitely not done yet. So there's a little bit of a give in the top of the cupcake, but it's still pretty soft on the inside. Although you can see they're definitely pretty close. All that purple blueberry juiciness getting out of there. Yeah. And we'll just take a quick peek at the cupcake as well and see what he's looking like. It's pretty tasty. Clay's using his bare hands. I wouldn't recommend this at home. Oh, no, that's still way too soft, so that's going to definitely need more time. The cupcakes, the smaller ones will be done faster than the cake will, just size-wise.
How much longer would you like?
I would say 5 more on the cupcakes, and we're probably like 10 or 15 more on the actual cake. And with the Adam's Natural Crunchy Peanut Butter, there's definitely chunks of peanut in here. The roller does not love going through those, so it's not really too big a deal. And these don't have to be even squares. I don't know how they're turning out so even right now because this never happens at home. And it's really like, it's not about the way it looks really for your pet. Your pet's gonna love these regardless just because it's delicious and you spent the time making them. It's more how you want them to look because, I know Gur and Goliath at home don't care. And honestly, we have 2 ginger cats that are pretty fond of the dog treats as well because they apparently think they are part dog. So these will just need to go into the oven, which I think we can actually sneak a tray of each in here and get these guys baking while we wait for the cupcakes to finish. It's funny, I still can open up a bag of our dog treats and think, wow, that smells good. Wow. All right, so these guys are looking pretty done. They come out of the pan pretty easily. They hold their form. They're nice and still a little soft to the touch, but they don't indent when I touch them, being, of course, careful not to burn yourself. So we're just going to put these aside to cool for a few minutes. I like to leave them in the pan for about 10 minutes before I depan them, just to kind of let them finish their baking process and set a little bit further. I'm pretty sure this cupcake, though, is going to need a little more time yet. Or I'm a liar. I like using a glass pan because you can look at the bottom of it to see how it looks, and it still looks a little under on the bottom, so we're definitely going to put him back in. I also forgot to bring toothpicks to use as testers, but that's another thing you can do is just poke a toothpick in there. If it comes out clean, you should be good to go. It is okay to use bare hands if you're equipped, but otherwise make sure you're using gloves. Yeah, and take a look at these guys real quick too. And so these guys, you do generally want them to be pretty hard baked, as I mentioned before, and they are pretty soft still, so they're definitely going to need some more time. We'll check these samples out real quick too. Sometimes these littler treats will bake faster, so they're still not ready. If you do end up over baking, it's not usually too much of a problem. I have yet to see our furry friends refuse something that is a little more on the dense side than we would like. So we'll just wait a few more minutes on the cupcakes and bones. And then in about 10 minutes, we'll depan these muffins here and let them cool off, these cupcakes. So we've hit our 10-minute mark now and can depan our little cupcakes here. So just pull them out and put them on a cooling rack. Guy wants to stick. They come out pretty nicely because the pan was well greased, so they'll just sit there to cool. We'll just double check this other pup cake too. Oh, had my paws on wrong there. Can't do that. I don't think it's done yet, but let's see here. Yeah, he's still a little under. And we'll just take a quick poke with our paw on these guys. Oh, we are ready to flip on these kids here though. I like to pull these guys out and flip them over so that they brown nice and evenly on both sides. And if you're not used to touching hot things, be careful doing this part. Don't want to burn yourself. So you can always use a spatula if you want.
If you roll it thinner, do you have to flip the little treats there?
Not usually, no. And we do usually roll out the samples a little bit thinner than the big treats, but I didn't do that this time. If you do want them to bake a little bit faster, and you can though, you can break them apart. That'll make all the pieces a little bit smaller, and they'll bake a little quicker. Put these guys back in. And we'll grab the other pan out and flip them over. Perfect. No bones about it. These are going to be great treats. Got to get in some puns there. And these guys will pop back in. I would say they probably have another 10 minutes, and I think that other cake is probably going to require another 10 minutes of baking as well. And the nice thing about using the sweet potato puree for the decorating frosting, if you will, is it's not going to be as temperamental as something like if you were to use a cream cheese frosting or anything that's milk or dairy based, because it's going to want to melt. The sweet potato usually sets just fine, even if it is a little on the warmer side, because it's sweet potato. Yeah, so that's kind of a nice hack. And also I've always objected to like the cream cheese or even whipped cream frosting for dogs. They don't need milk any more than we do, so I would hate to turn, again, something that's supposed to be a fun and delicious treat into something that causes an upset stomach or, you know, an accident that anyone needs to clean up. So
Carob just tastes nasty. Carob just tastes nasty.
Yeah, you can use carob too, but I don't know. And then I always worry that, you know, if you're using carob in dog treats, that people will associate it with chocolate too much and then make the assumption they can use chocolate, which, like grapes, is a hit or miss. I've had so many people tell me, oh, I gave my dogs chocolate all their lives and they were fine, but, you know, what could be a normal amount of, an okay amount of chocolate for a big dog could kill a little dog, so better not to even play with it. We did carob brownies for a little while when we first started at market, but I heard too many people call them chocolate, and I was like, I don't like this. It's too close. So now I would do maybe like blondie brownies that, you know, didn't have anything added to them, but I stay away from the carob. All right, give this pupcakeola another check here. I think we're getting there. Another easy way to check and see how it's doing is it should start pulling away from the pan some, and this is definitely doing that. So we're going to go ahead and call him good, and we'll let him cool for a little bit. And we'll check these treats here, see how they're looking. Getting a nice crispy shell on the outside. There's still a little bit of give to them. And these guys will continue to bake once you pull them from the oven, so just keep that in mind. We're going to let these bake for another 8 minutes. And we'll check these guys. There's still a little bit of give, which means there's still some moisture in there. These samples are getting close though, but probably these guys will be done in about 8 minutes as well. We're gonna let this guy cool, but we can go ahead and play around with decorating these pup cakes here. Sometimes it's fun if you're making like a pull apart pup cake for your pooch. You can make a little paw shape just using the pup cakes in your imagination. So you'll do like a little upside down heart for the bottom toe pad and then put the other toe pads around like that. Or you can just decorate them individually, which is probably what we'll end up doing here since I don't really have like a box for transport, but that's perfectly fine. What I have in my little Ziploc bag here is simply a sweet potato puree. I just took a couple of sweet potatoes, peeled them, and then boiled them in water for about 15 minutes, let them cool, and then I mashed them up and put them in this bag, which we're going to use as our piping bag because pretty much everyone at home has a Ziploc bag, but not everyone has a piping bag or piping tips. So an easy way to do this, you just cut a little corner out of your bag there. That'll leave you with an opening to pipe your sweet potato puree if you wanted to. Otherwise, you could leave them undecorated. Dogs love them just as they are this way. Or you can, put some sweet potato puree on there. We're just going to do a little bit around here. Do a little on the edge here too. And this is, again, mostly for us, the dogs. This is just an additional fun treat for them. And I have our leftover blueberries from when we were making our pup cakes. And I've also brought some berries that I rinsed from home already, and some edible flowers, which are also fun to decorate with. Oh, thank you. Have some raspberries, some blackberry, and then some little violas, which are an edible flower. And they were rinsed already. So we'll do a little pretty little viola there. Maybe a blueberry on top. So a pretty little pup cake for your pooch there. And if you make a mistake or, oh no, oh geez, what have I done? Easy enough, just take a little knife. You can just smooth it on and decorate it from there. We'll even put a little more on because that's not even enough. I should have made a bigger mistake. There. Oops. Oh no. So then we'll just frost it like a little cupcake. And if you don't have like a spatula at home, you can just use a knife. No need to get crazy or get crazier. We'll put another little flower on here. A little elegant treat for your dog to enjoy. And there are all kind of hacks online where you can look and see different ways of cutting the Ziploc bag to achieve different piping strategies for you. But again, if you're not really happy with it, you can just kind of smooth it out or do whatever. This is more for us than for them because it's going to be a delicious treat, so they don't really care how it looks, which is the great thing about baking for dogs. And this one we'll do a little berry explosion with a flower. Some puppy's going to be very lucky. And then we'll knock them all over. Okay, there we go. Perfect.
Is there a way to thicken up the sweet potato puree?
Not really. It's mostly just being careful with how much water you add in the process of like boiling them and then mashing them. Or add more potato if you needed to, like if you thought it was too thin or something like that. But once it's done, you're kind of dealt with the texture that you have on hand. I did maybe add a little too much moisture to my sweet potatoes when I was mashing them, but again, no dog will complain about this. They're just not gonna, if you use too much water, then they're just not gonna, it's not gonna pipe as pretty. Something else you can do to kind of thicken this up is to use a hand mixer to beat it a little bit, and that might add a little bit more of a whipped consistency to it, which if I brought my mixer with me, I could have tried to kind of like whip it a little bit to give it a little more texture. But again, I don't know a dog who would say no to any of these treats. You could even get all fancy and put a little bit of your sweet potato puree inside of a raspberry. Ooh. For an extra little treat. You can almost pretend like it's one of those little raspberry cheesecakes that people do. And we'll do one more so we have at least an even 6-pack here. And sometimes because you're using a potato puree, you'll get little clumps in your bag where it won't want to pipe out. And so you might just want to move off to somewhere separate to like put a little extra pressure to get that clump out. Otherwise you'll end up with a potato explosion, which is not necessarily a great time. And these do actually sit pretty well in the refrigerator, not on the cooling rack though. There. But you can keep them in the fridge for at least a day or two before the potato really starts absorbing into the pup cake and making them kind of soggy, which again, a dog is not going to object to, but texturally I would find it unappealing. But I also don't eat dirt or grass or other things, so. Little flower there. Perfect. And so we've got 6 little decorated pup cakes. And if you had wanted to, and maybe even with a little thicker bit of a potato puree, you could like pipe the frosting or the potato frosting on all of these together to make like a square that you could then decorate. You can also use dog treats to decorate your pup cakes if you didn't want to use berries or flowers of any kind. Or you can even just use their dry dog food because it's just a treat to them that you've put on top of a treat. So you can use the little round kibbles as pebbles around your treats that you're making. Or if you wanted and had like jerky treats or something like that at home and wanted to mix up textures, you could use those too. Just making sure that everything you're using is dog safe and doesn't have any ingredients that are going to be toxic to them. So these guys are nicely browned. I would call these done. Perfect. And these guys don't need to sit on the cooling or on the tray from the oven. They can immediately go onto a cooling rack. Again, if it's too hot for you to use your bare hands, use a spatula. Don't burn yourself. And these will cool off rather quickly once they're off the pan. If you feel like they might be a little underdone, you can leave them on the pan for a few minutes and they'll continue cooking, or baking, I should say. And so certainly at this point, our little samples are going to be done. These mustaches definitely look like they're done as well. The samples, we definitely want to try and get those off the tray sooner than later. They're definitely done and don't need them to bake any additional time. I like to call this
show the pour trick.
I'm sorry?
You can show the pouring trick.
Oh, gotcha. Sometimes if we overbake the samples or the treats a little bit, we like to call those blackened or Cajun style. Very special. And then for the samples, to make it just a little bit easier so you're not having to touch each one of these individual little crumbs, you can just grab your parchment paper and pour them right onto the cooling rack. It's one of the reasons I enjoy using parchment paper so much, is it keeps your trays from getting dirty, but then also makes it a little bit easier to work with the treats sometimes. And this guy feels cool enough to come out of the tray or out of the pan here. The glass is still kind of warm. If you can and you have a spare cooling rack, the easiest thing to do is to put the rack directly over the pan and then flip it upside down to depan it. But I've mistakenly used all my cooling racks already. Clay's gonna move things for me because he's the best. going to move these little pup cakes over here, get them out of the way. Maybe I should do this too. You see inside this little delightful thing here. A little blueberry goodness in there. It's a nice little crumb. Looks pretty delicious. Smells good. That pan is still hot. Clay's using his bare hands to demonstrate this. What a disappointment. It's okay though, because the dogs won't care. Again, the great thing about making treats for your pets is that if it doesn't come out perfect, that's okay, because they will still enjoy it. So when this cools down, we can just cover that little divot with some sweet potato puree, and no one will be the wiser. And then we'll have this little extra tidbit for pooches to sample. Something else that's kind of fun, although Clay looks at me like I've lost my mind completely when I do it, is to make little cake pops out of these for your dog. What I did when I did that before is I had shaped one of the cakes into a bone for a dog. So I just kind of like cut a little triangle out, or not a triangle, but like kind of shaped that more into the top of a bone, then cut down, and then shaped this into the bottom of the bone. And then with the leftover crumb, I just crushed it up really well, put it on a sheet pan, put it back in the oven for about 10 minutes to dry that out, and then mixed that with some of the sweet potato puree to form little cake balls, and then rolled those in some of the leftover crumb. The dogs absolutely love them. Clay did act like I had lost my mind completely though, so just be warned if you do that, that people around you may think you've lost it. But it was a lot of fun to give them little cake ball treats too. So this guy will just have to cool before we decorate him, and that should do it. All right, so we had put our pup cake into the fridge to cool off a little bit so we can decorate it. I just put the pieces that fell off on the top here, and we're just going to put some of the sweet potato puree on top of it, so we'll cover up that horrific mistake Clay made. Certainly, I had nothing to do with it. I did cut a little extra corner in my piping bag here to make for a little bit of a different design, and it didn't quite work the way I wanted it to, so lovely Crystal found some piping tips here, so we're going to experiment with that as well. And actually for this part, I think I would like to do a piece of parchment paper maybe to decorate on. Perfect, thank you. It's totally fine to reuse your parchment paper, at least a few times. You can do that with no ill results. It's also kind of nice for the environment. Reduce, reuse, recycle, all that good stuff there. So I'm just trying to get those pieces in there. And I think I'm just going to kind of go over them completely, and then I'll smooth this out, and we'll see what kind of pretty little designs maybe we can do with this other tip that we've got. We're not going to ask too much of it though. But you really can do a lot with just stuff you will find in your house, in your kitchen, to make a pretty little cake for your friend. I feel like Bob Ross. We'll put some pretty little sweet potato puree here. We'll put a little pipette friend. Okay. Just going to smooth that out into a even-ish layer. Your dog will not care. Our Chihuahua likes to lick all the sweet potato puree off before getting to the actual cake itself. Don't really have any major designs in mind for this pup cake. We're not celebrating anything currently, no bark days or pup-iversaries or anything like that. So I just put some of the sweet potato puree in this little Ziploc bag, cut a little hole in it for the tip to go in, and we'll do a little rosette over here, a happy little rosette. And again, you can always like use a mixer to beat your puree to try and get a little more form to it if you want to. Or if not, it's just, you know, for you and your dog. So, or for your dog, you're just going to look at how pretty it is and admire your handiwork. Put little rosettes there. We'll get some berries on here. Raspberries are a delicious, fiber-rich treat for you and your friend. Only have 2 flowers left, so we'll go ahead and use those guys. Maybe. There we go. I'll see if I have enough in here to pipe anything out. Let's see if we'll do a bark. And you could use also just regular potato instead of sweet potato if you wanted. Same thing, just boil her up, mash her, and then go from there. Get a little bark on here. Boop. Feels like those need blueberries. And we'll throw some of these blackberries on here too. Because we have them, might as well use them. Perfect. So a little bark cake with sweet potato puree and some lovely little berries to accent it. Will be a great little treat for your dog to enjoy. You can put stuff like, happy birthday or pup-iversary or their name on it. You could also, decorate it with a little bone if you hadn't used all your space up already. A little bone to the side maybe. Little mustache over here. And your dog will have a little gourmet snack time. I feel like that's a really weird ending.